This morning I want to look into a case that's called the Brighton axe murder. Now, I didn't realize that there have been so many murders committed with axes that I did not already know about. And this was one of them. If you look back through my previous videos, I think the first one that I did was, of course, Lizzie Borden, because I think that is the most famous one with an axe. But then through doing that one, I was turned on to the Valeska axe murders. And then I did an assessment of that case. And then just a couple weeks ago, I learned about Candy Montgomery, and I'm still fascinated with that case, especially after looking this case over. The Candy Montgomery case, and I've reached out to the author of the book to get more details about it. Of course, I would love to talk to Candy Montgomery, but she apparently is not talking to anybody. I'd like to change that because it's fascinating. But then this case, of course. So, what is fascinating about this case? It's not just that it's done with an axe. There was an arrest in this case, which came 40 years after the murder. And I believe that I'll walk you through it. I believe that if you see what I see, you will come to the same conclusion that I have. But then I'm going to shock you probably with my final conclusion and how it ties into the West Memphis 3 case. All right, so a lot to unpack. In February 19th, I believe, 1982, a married couple with a 3-year-old child, they were the Krauseneck family. The murder victim was a white female in her, I want to say, 20s, named Kathleen Krauseneck. She'd been married to her husband, Jim, all through college, and then after college, they stayed together. He got a job working for Kodak in Rochester, New York, which ties into the Alphabet murders, and the girl in the red bandana that I had that I was looking for in Death Row Confidential, because she was a Kodak girl from Rochester, New York. And so she did all the modeling and stuff through there. Her name was Georgia Durrett. But at the time, I didn't know it. I was just looking for a girl with a red bandana whose photograph was buried in a serial killer's garage. So it's crazy how they connect. But just because they connect doesn't mean anything. All right? But when I was researching this, I saw that he was employed by Kodak in Rochester in 82, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. But anyhow, he supposedly had gotten his doctorate degree from, I want to say, Colorado State University. And because of that, he was hired at Kodak, and they were making some decent money, it appears, through my research. But some problems arose in the family. But listen, problems arise in almost every household, okay? In this particular instance, at work, Jim was being pressured to produce his PhD degree, on which he was hired because of. Now, they should have asked for that, obviously, in the beginning of proof before they hired him. Well, it turns out all along that Jim never had a PhD. Now, that's red flag number 1 to me. Your integrity as a human being is the number 1 important aspect in life for me. If you don't have integrity, you don't have anything. So right there, he's already lying. He's lying to his wife because she believes that he has a PhD. He's lying to his job that he has a PhD, and he doesn't. So they're harassing him to get this. Police find out eventually that he never had one. So on the morning of the murders, or the night of the murders, which was again February 19th, 1982, Jim states he gets up to go to work at 6:30 in the morning. When he leaves, his wife is fine right beside him. Daughter's fine in her bedroom. She's 3 years old. He goes to work. When he comes home, he finds, and I don't know if he found this, but he had to have. There was broken glass in a door leading into the house. So you had forced entry. Next to that broken glass is a axe. Okay? It's a wood maul axe, different than a regular axe. But it is leaned up against the wall going in through this broken glass door. You know, it looks like whoever did this knocked out a frame, reached in, unlocked it, left the maul axe there, and continued. As he traverses through his house, in the living room, there is a black plastic garbage bag next to some like cookware, like silverware, stuff that could be melted down or fenced, stolen property, but it's on the floor. Her purse, Kathleen's purse, is on the floor. Looks so it's been gone through, contents dumped out. And when you go upstairs into the bedroom, and I can show you a picture because it's not, you can't see too much, it's not too gory. This is the picture of Kathleen dead with an axe still protruding from her skull. Now, as you look at the picture, you can see, I think, some of the things that I took notice to right away is a lot of blankets, the covering of her. But then I looked and said, well, it's February in New York. It's obviously very cold there, so she has a lot of blankets on because of that. It's not because the killer covered her up and tried to cover her face through remorse or anything like that. Pretty shocking, that this axe is still sticking from her skull. But that's the scene, folks. That's what we have. So, Jim discovers his wife with the axe protruding from her head. He grabs his 3-year-old daughter, Sarah, from her bedroom, which is right across the hall, and they go across to the neighbors, and the neighbors call police and say, there's a murder across the street. The husband's here. He can barely speak. Please send somebody. Pretty cut and dry. Not really a gory scene. I mean, I've certainly seen a lot worse. It is apparent that she was asleep in her bed and she took an axe, one single blow to the skull, and the offender left it there. Now, we can learn a lot from that, but you never want to focus right on the body. Start further out and work your way in. At least that's how I do it. So the first thing that I would want to look at is entry into the house. It's forced entry, which indicates what? That you're looking for somebody from the outside. But I think if you really stop right there before you even enter the house and you look at that scene, right there, red flags should go up to you as an investigator, as they did for the police department investigators who initially looked at this. Why would an individual use two different weapons to enter the house and to murder the victim inside? Right off the bat, it doesn't make sense, right? You have a wood maul. So you're going to break the glass with the wood maul, set it down, reach inside, unlock it. Then what? Go upstairs and murder? Sure, but where's your weapon now? Or you break the glass with the wood maul, set it aside, then grab the axe. They were both inside the garage. And now you traverse up the stairs and murder with an axe. Why wouldn't you just take the wood maul that you just used to smash the glass? Right? Think about that. Really, really think about that. Because I think you could solve this case on those merits alone. And an outside offender is not going to carry two axes. One to break a glass and the other to murder. That makes no sense. Because the first axe can do both. It can gain entry for you, and you can murder with it. So, to me, that part is relatively easy. So, then you go into the living room, and sure, when I first saw the crime scene photos of the living room, I immediately said that's staged, because I've seen enough of them that I know that it's not that clean but it could be. Okay, nothing is ever 100%. You could have a meticulous burglar who empties it down, sits down on the floor, is going through it. He has not a care in the world. So you can't rule it out just because it looks clean. But take note of it. It does look clean. But then as you go throughout the house, you notice that there's a lot of valuables that could have been easily pocketed if this was a burglary. And they weren't. Again, not 100%. Sometimes, things are missed. But what do? You take note of it. And then work your way up into the bedroom. Nothing looks disturbed. The only thing out of place is an axe protruding from Kathleen's skull. It's easy to tell that she was sleeping. So now, as an investigator, the autopsy is going to be very relevant, and that's what you're waiting for. Of course, you're going to test all the items for fingerprints and fibers. That's all that they had to do back in 1982. There was no DNA. There was no fingerprints on the axe handle or any other place. The only piece of evidence was a shoe print on the black garbage bag that was left in the living room. That eventually matched shoes that belonged to the husband. To me, it's not a very big piece of evidence. It's his house, it's his garbage bag, it's his shoes. So what? I think a defense could very easily argue it should be there. But for the prosecution, it's a good piece of evidence for them because it's laying next to the supposed burglary items. So, that's what they had. No DNA. Of course, they didn't test for DNA then. No fingerprints. What I could deduce from that crime scene is this. Now, remember, I'm a big believer, and I get upset when experts get on television and podcasts and they claim, well, the person had to have known the victim because of the number of stab wounds. And that means it's personal. And I think that's so full of shit for lack of a professional term, it's so outdated that people need to get rid of it. However, you can tell certain things by the number of wounds, such as, was there a fight? Was there an argument? Was there rage in the act itself? So, how do I determine that? Well, you notice that the female victim, as we said, was sleeping. There was one strike of an axe. To me, I correlate that. Well, and this is important too, and this plays into it. There was no sexual assault. I don't think I mentioned that. And that's very, very, very important. There's no sexual assault. So it's not a sexually motivated crime. Okay? Now, sometimes there doesn't have to be a sexual assault for it to be a sexually motivated crime. The act of the murder itself could be sexually stimulating, and the offender may be impotent, and he may just get off on masturbating on the scene, but there's no indication of that, right? So I'm not even going to think that this was a sexually motivated crime. This is almost like a business decision, like a business action that went wrong, a transaction, where a gun, if available, would have been used. Because it's quick, it eliminates whatever problem there is, and you go on with your day. But since I've determined, because of the axe maul outside and then the different axe up there, that this is in the cleanness of the burglary, to me, this is really looking like an inside job, remember, and no sexual assault. So it's a totality of all those things that are now making me believe, as an investigator, I got to be looking inside this house. It was one strike to the head. There was no fight. There was no rage. There was no anger. And now you say, well, Kenny, how can you say that there's no anger? Someone swung an axe and took somebody's life, left it embedded in their skull. How can that not be anger? Because with an unskilled person who is angry, who has never killed before, certainly with an axe, I would expect to see a lot more blows. Case in point, Candy Montgomery murder. She hit Leslie Gore 41 times with that axe and claimed self-defense. Now, why? She's never killed anybody with an axe, as far as we know, other than Leslie. Why so many? 28 wounds to her head. Why? Because there was anger there. Okay? There was anger. Doesn't mean they had to have known each other because of the number of wounds, but there was rage there. And that rage can come from an outside offender just as it could somebody that knows the person, like Candy knew Leslie. In the Brighton axe murder and Kathleen, there's just one strike. So to me, there was no anger there. This is somebody getting rid of a problem. And again, I would say, if they had access to a gun, I think that would have been the weapon of choice. But it's a weapon of opportunity for someone inside the house. That's huge. An outside offender, although possible, it is not probable that an outside offender is going to go to a home that he does not know, look in the garage, and say, oh, this axe looks like a great weapon. This isn't Pulp Fiction with Butch coming out of a pawn shop looking for a weapon to go back in to murder the rapist. That's not what it is. It's a weapon of opportunity. It's inside the house. So, although I do believe that this crime was premeditated, You have to look at what's available to the offender in order to commit the crime. So, as you can tell, I believe that her husband, Jim Krauseneck, is the one who murdered his wife. Now, again, you could cross and split hairs all you want to try to figure out why he did it. I don't know enough about Jim's background. Again, you go to his high school and talk to those people, because that's when your true character starts to come out and emerge. And he lied about that PhD. Now, some other things that he did later, like cutting the interviewer off short, walking out, those things certainly raise red flags to me. Now, there's some people that will say, well, listen, you don't have to talk to the police. And I believe that too. Trust me, I believe it. But I also know that it's a red flag when you don't, especially when somebody like JonBenet Ramsey's murdered and the father scoops up everybody and moves out of town and doesn't cooperate with police. I don't care what any of you say. John Ramsey did not cooperate with police. I don't care what anybody says. He did not. Doesn't make him guilty, but I'm just telling you the facts. James Krauseneck took his daughter, 3-year-old Sarah, and moved out of town. Moved back to Michigan. Almost immediately. Draw some parallels there. Now, it doesn't automatically mean anything, right? You don't want to be in the same house your wife was murdered in. I get it. You move out. But when you couple that with everything, the axe, the one blow, the lying on the PhD, it's a cumulative. It's a gathering of all those facts. And it's the totality of that makes you believe and point towards a suspect. So, right now, hey, it matches everything for me. But years later, well, I should back up. Relatively shortly, another suspect emerged. And I think his name was Ed. Doesn't matter what his name is. He was a sexual predator. And he had broke into people's house, burglarized it, and killed the women. Just like this. They talked to him. He abruptly became agitated and ended the interview. So both him and Jim did that. They're not both guilty, are they? Years go by. Eventually, I think his name was Ed, is arrested for something else, and he's doing life in prison. He sends a confession note years later that he did this. And he wants certain guarantees in life. And those are, I won't be buried on prison property, I want my kids to have this money, all these things. And he would confess. Well, he confessed, but dang, I've never seen a worse confession letter in my life. He got everything wrong. Didn't even know her. He said she was overweight. She had dark hair. Just everything was wrong about it. It's a blatant lie. So all roads lead back to the husband. Now, I don't know what he did from 1982 until 2019. Because that's when he was rearrested. Not rearrested. He was arrested for the first time. By a great investigator. I love how the investigator, and I wish I could remember his name, went and interviewed him at his house and told him he was an actor. And he's acting, and he confronted him and said, you did this. I like that. They did a good job. They saw everything that I see when I look at this case and I look at the crime scene photos. There is little doubt in my mind that the husband Jim was responsible for this axe murder. Why? I don't know. I don't know enough about their background. But just looking at the crime scene, you can tell, and that's half of the battle. You look at the crime scene photos and you assess it. It's not giving a criminal profile. It's assessing the crime scene based off of what you see. The single blow, okay, no rage there, almost like a business decision. 2, the wood maul being used. Now, it is quite simple, why the wood maul was not used. Because he staged it after the murder. He had already used the axe and embedded that into his wife's head. He had to use something different in order to break that pane of glass. All you need to do is wrap your hand and hit it a little bit. There's 100 different items in that garage, and for somebody to use a wood maul, that's overdoing it, right? So he embeds the axe in his wife's head. Now he's got to come up with a game plan of staging it. So he goes back out and he has to use the wood maul, right? If he's making this look like an axe murder, because he can't use the axe, the regular axe, because he'd have to pull it out of her skull. It just makes no sense. No burglar who, especially an experienced burglar, if he's going to go in through the garage and look for a weapon to break a pane of glass, not a door down, you're not hacking at a door. In the Gail Matthews case, same thing. Little pane of glass in the window, knocked out so you can reach in and unlock. You want to be as quiet as possible. And you're going to use a wood maul axe? Okay. Come on, that makes no sense. So, I mean, it's somebody staging it. It's staging 101. You can look at it and see that it's just staged. And why do you stage it? To throw off suspicion of the murder inside. Now, let me hit you. I told you at the beginning of this, I'm going to hit you with a shocking take on it. And this isn't for sensationalism, it's just how I feel. He should have never been arrested. Now you say, well, Kenny, you just went on for half an hour about how he's guilty. Being guilty of a crime and being convicted of it are two different things. There is zero evidence that he did this. Direct evidence. Zero. I can do all the crime scene assessment that I want. You can link a shoe print to him that's not in blood, which would have done him in probably, but it's just on a bag that came from his house. And him lying about a PhD, people lie all the time. He shouldn't have been convicted. And that's how I relate it to the West Memphis 3 case. Although you have some circumstantial evidence in both. The West Memphis 3, I believe, because of those knots on the 3 kids that were hogtied, all 3 of those knots were different knots. You have 3 different offenders, which match Damian Eccles, Jason Baldwin, and Jesse Miskelly. So yes, that would be a circumstantial, but it's not foolproof. So just like that case, there was not enough to arrest those 3 kids. I don't know whether they're guilty or whether they're not. I just know there wasn't enough there and they should have never been arrested. Same with Jim Krauseneck. Not enough there to arrest him. So I told you that the autopsy would tell you some things. And the most important thing that the autopsy said was that Cathleen was killed between 4:30 in the morning and I think 7:30. I think that was the case. And because of that timeline, Jim had already gone to work. So that was his alibi. But then Michael Bauden was brought onto the case, and he backed that up to she was murdered between 3:30 and 6:30, which squarely put him able to do this. Now, the problem I have with that is I've seen some great true crime legends who I hate to say have been bought. Okay? But I'm going to say that they were bought. Because when the defense attorneys, or even the state, however it goes, it's usually the defense, starts throwing millions of dollars for you to look at this case and try to come our way on this, they usually do. And again, it goes back to integrity. I am not saying Michael Bauden was bought. Maybe that's his true opinion, was at 3:30. And I believe that it probably is, because it's not an exact science. You can use lividity as in body temperature, dependent upon the ambience of the room temperature, and all that in order to come to a good guesstimate of when the person died and the digestion of the food inside their stomach. And there's a lot of factors. Now, Michael Bauden and the original medical examiner know far more about that than I do. I wouldn't even dare to say I'm an amateur in that opinion. But I have looked at enough cases to know that it's not an exact science. Just like criminal profiling is not an exact science. It's the totality of all those things, okay? So by backing that timeline up, 3:30, it helped convict Jim Krauseneck of this crime, without a doubt. Without that testimony, he may never have been convicted. And I don't believe he should have been convicted. Not because he's innocent, just because there was not enough evidence there. That, hey, that's the way our justice system is set up. You have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. I didn't make the rules. I just follow them. You know, somebody like O.J. Simpson, hey, to me, there was enough evidence to convict him 20 times over. But the defense put enough reasonable doubt into that jury's mind, and a lot of racial stuff played into that as well. But he was certainly guilty of it, and I'm sure he's paying the price right now as we speak where he's at. But I digress. The Brighton axe murder. A fascinating case study, but I wanted to highlight this because if you know what to look for in your first on-scene crime scene assessment, whatever it is, if you know what to look for right then and there, it's going to help start tuning out all that noise you hear. Like, it's got to be a crazy person. Only a crazy person would come into a house and murder somebody with an axe. That's what they used to say. They really would. They would come on, the chief of police would get on television and say that. We are looking for a mentally unstable person. No, you're not. You're looking for a sociopath. Now, one of the biggest hurdles that the jury was hung up on in this case was, okay, if we believe that Jim murdered his wife, we cannot get over the fact that he left his daughter, 3-year-old, in that house with that mom all day. How could he do that? Well, listen, very easy to get over that hurdle. You look at what he did to his wife. Once you come to grips with that, then it's very easy to see, hey, he has no remorse. He's a sociopath. And it doesn't bother him at all that his daughter is there alone. And that daughter went in and seen the mom's body and had to make herself breakfast, and she dressed herself and stayed in her room talking to her dolls, saying it's going to be all right. Horrible. That girl, and I'm sure she has dealt with hopefully some therapy over this, but she spoke at her dad's sentencing, saying the justice system was corrupt and that her dad is not responsible for her mom's murder. I understand why she feels that way. I see it all the time in cases that I've worked. People can't believe it. They just can't believe it because they never see that side, or they don't want to see that side. I would not be shocked to know that leading up to Kathleen's murder, that there was tension in that household over something. Whether it's her wanting another child, him lying about his PhD and the possibility that now he's going to get fired and things like that. And they had arguments. Sarah probably witnessed those, but at 3 years old, she probably blocked them out. But I bet that they were there. But because of the single axe wound to the head, it seems to me, as an amateur psychologist, that either Kathleen knew how to keep her mouth shut to not anger him, or he did not anger easily and didn't show it. Because if he did, I believe you would have seen many more wounds. And I think it would have happened while they were fighting. Again, remember, what's the number one cause of murder? It's conflict. You have to find where that conflict is. And if you can't find any, and you look for sexual assault, because when there's sexual assault, you're not going to find conflict, because the sexual assault murder is usually from an offender that is not known or is just an acquaintance of the person. So here there was no sexual assault, as I mentioned. Okay, now we got to start looking at conflict. Who hated her? When you exhaust that, where are you going to look? Inside the house. Okay, what's the conflict there? Sometimes you'll find it, sometimes you won't. In this case, I bet they found it because the crime scene itself tells you that it's somebody from inside the house. An offender is not just going to be walking up the street. Oh, that looks like a good house to burglarize at 6:30 in the morning when it's daylight out. I'm going to go in with no weapons. Oh, this axe. Oh, 2 axes. Oh, that looks good. I'll just use this heavier axe to break out this little 1/4-inch pane of glass. And then I'm going to set that down. Now I'm going to grab that big axe and I'm going to go in and I'm going to eliminate the biggest threat there. Oh, she's sleeping in bed? How nice. Woo. Okay, 1 chop to the head. I'm going to leave the axe there and I'm not going to take anything. I'm going to look through your purse. No, there's nothing there. I'm going to look at this cookware. No, there's nothing there. I'm just going to leave. I'm not going to sexually assault. Does that make sense? Absolutely not. Doesn't make sense. So, the defense team for Jim Krauseneck can get on the television and say he's innocent all they want. It's not the case. Now, they can get on television all they want and say he shouldn't have been convicted, and I will back them up. But he did it. And that's the bottom line. Because Stone Cold said so, I guess. I don't know, but that's the bottom line. It's easy. This was an easy case to figure out. Especially just off of the crime scene. Kind of reminded me a little bit of Sam Shepard case. But maybe I'll link that one to the end of this. Yeah, I will. The Sam Shepard case. Check that one out. That is not as clean as this one is. But there's a lot of parallels in the ransacking, the wife, things like that. It amazes me how and this is probably the truest statement that I'm going to make on this video. How much we hurt the ones we love the most, right? Think about it. Think of some of the nastiest fights and things that you've been in with your significant other and the things that you've said. And you wouldn't probably say those things to a stranger, but it's because you're comfortable enough with them and you say these things. But what I'm getting at is that it almost always, unless it's a sexually motivated crime, the spouse or somebody inside the house, even a child, a sibling, whatever it is usually responsible when the murder happens inside the house. I'd like to know the statistic on that, but I do know that it's rather high, and I just know that from so many cases that I've looked at. Now, one of the areas that people tend to not pay attention to is when somebody is killed outside the house. Like, what is her name? Is it Robin Enders? I did a video on her early where she was killed at a salon. I think it was an Unsolved Mysteries case. And they interviewed her husband, and he was weird. The stuff that he said, changed the locks on the doors, something with her son, he treated him bad, slept with her bones or something like that. But anyhow, everyone wanted to point the finger at him. He did it. And when you look at it and the totality of the evidence, he didn't. In my opinion, he didn't do it. And it was because it was outside the house. When you see something like that, and Jody Hoosenstrand's another example of this. If somebody that loves somebody and has access to their domiciles, there is no reason for them to kill outside of a house in broad daylight. Okay? Unless they are very angry at that particular moment in time. No premeditation. It is, I snap and I kill her. Okay, I will buy that. But if you're telling me that they premeditated and they waited till they went to work and then the husband left the house that they share together, go to her work, premeditated, and abduct her, and then kill her and leave her in the woods, I'm telling you, you're full of shit. That's not how it works. Think about it. Why premeditate and act where you have the most probability of getting caught outside of your house? No. If you know you're going to kill them, all right, yes, I'm angry. I'm not angry enough to get caught. I'm going to wait till she comes home, and I'm going to kill her in the quiet confidence of my house where I can take my time, and I am not going to be seen by anybody. That's how you do it. That's how it's been done for centuries. So always remember that when you see somebody, a female especially, killed at work, outside somewhere, not inside the house, and they're immediately blaming the husband. Think about it. So, hey, here's a good time for a good plug, because what I just taught you right there and there is in this book, Mastering Cold Case Investigations. Everything that you want to know about crime scene staging, about victimology, about suspectology, criminal profiling, crime scene assessments, conflict, greed, sex, revenge. Remember, that falls under all of those things. A murder usually does. I teach it in that book. I'm very proud of that book. That took me a long time to write, and it was through 20 years of least 25 years of taking notes, knowledge, all the way from Lock Haven University, where I got my criminal justice degree, and on master's degree work on criminal profiling, and years on the job with police departments and district attorney's office as a detective, and then a cold case detective. I mean, everything that I've learned and I'm trying to pass on is in that book. So I'm going to put a little snippet of a video right now so you can order that book. So I always get the question, how do you become a cold case detective? Ken Mains, how did you become a cold case detective? Well, I had that in mind a long time ago, over 10 years ago, and I got the answer right here. Mastering Cold Case Investigations, a guidebook for detectives. I wrote this 550-page behemoth for that purpose, because when I was in high school, when I was in college, and then when I became a detective, I wanted to know more about cold cases, why they go cold, why are they unsolved? Is it evidence? Is it lack of determination? Is it perseverance? Is it politics? All the above. Well, I set the answer to all those questions in my new book. It's been 10 years of research, writing, jotting down things. I knew that I was going to write this book eventually, and it finally has come to a head where I'm able to actually get it done, get it published by Unsolved No More Publishing, and get it out to you. So who's this book for? It's for detectives. It's for amateur detectives. It's for college students, academia, forensics. The topics I cover in this book, from what is a cold case, victimology, research, crime scene location, criminal profiling, conflict, greed, sex and revenge, possibilities versus probabilities. That is huge in this book. I go through that a lot because that's the basis and foundation of my methodology. Evidence, sketches. Of course, you have affirmations. Why should you listen? Social media, the rule of psychology, equivocal deaths, modus operandi, signature. Legal and ethical considerations in cold cases, integrity, involving as a cold case detective, serial killers, missing persons, domestic violence, exposing myths, premeditation versus spontaneous, confidential informants, wrongly convicted, clandestine graves, you name it. I cover it in here. 550-page hardcover textbook. And along with all those topics, I also wanted to do case studies, especially case studies on confessions. Why? Because you can learn so much from confessions. At the end of the book, I go in great detail about killers in general who have confessed, why they did it, and what we can learn. That's always the most important thing, what we can learn from them and move forward and apply what we learned on that case to a future case. So I have all that. I tried to incorporate as much as I could, and there's a lot in there about real life cases that I have worked on and I have either solved or learned something from. And I'll tie that to a specific chapter, along with tips, certain things that I think you should look for in certain areas. It's a great book to learn from, but it's not just for active law enforcement members, private investigators, defense attorneys. Everybody can learn from this book. And that is what is motivated me to write this. Is I want people to learn. I am tired of seeing wrongfully convicted people. I'm tired of the politics of district attorneys' offices and state police and local jurisdictions who either don't have the resources to do it or they just pass it off because they don't know how, they don't want to, they don't have the desire, the determination. And all that does is affect the victims and the victims' families. And I see it time and time again. You will see endorsements and affirmations from victims' family members in here who I've worked with in the past because they are the most important people. To pass off what I have learned to you so you can be a great investigator, you can be a great detective, and you can solve cases just like I do. Get your copy now I'll sign it. I'll get it out to you and start learning. That way we can start solving cold cases together. And then that's it. I'll be out, and until next time. Brighton axe murderer. Guy's guilty, but he should have never been convicted. That's it. Thanks for watching. Mains out.